So, good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a good first conference day yesterday. And we are starting this morning with serials as the first session. And this session has two parts. The first one is led by Owen Stephens, who will talk about the serials, the development of a new serials app, about the progress that we've made and the plannings that we do have. And then there is a second part where Joe Reimers will talk about receiving capabilities, claiming, routing, and binding. And there we will talk about requirements. And so if you have any questions, we will have questions after each part. And with that, I would hand over to Owen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear and everybody online can hear. If you have any questions online, then if you can type them into the chat, then Martina will be monitoring the chat. Thank you very much, Martina. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be here today to present on the work that is currently happening for serials, and basically I want to talk about what that work is, what the scope of that work is, show you where we are right now, tell you what our plans are for the immediate and then medium and long-term future. I talk about serials. We had a lot of debate as we started about the definition of what a serial is. What we're thinking about here is things that are issued in parts and are continuous in some way. Essentially, I think that probably anything that Folio you would order as an ongoing order might be talked about as a serial, although obviously that there then could be breakdown within that between like a subscribed resource and a standing order. We're focused in this work on print subscribed resources that have a regular publication pattern. So one that has some way of saying, this is our expectation of what's going to come this year or in the next period. So how do we get here? So the orders module supports marking ongoing orders as subscriptions with some associated information recorded at order and order line level, but lacks functionality for supporting other aspects of serials work in libraries right now. And to bridge this gap, in 2022, GBV, the German library network, and Duke agreed to fund work to develop new functionality focusing on print serials. Knowledge Integration, which is a UK-based software development company, they've done a lot of work in Folio, including the ERM modules and the open access module, both of which I'm talking about later today if you want to come along. And the dashboard module. And I'm an independent consultant, but I do a lot of work with Knowledge Integration, and they brought me on board as the product owner. At the moment, a small group from the funders and the development team are working to develop the initial functionality, which is what I'll show you today. And we have done some consultation outreach to the community, but that has been, I think it's fair to say, minimal. I think I last did an update in November last year, so to the acquisition SIG. So this is the next update. We do obviously want to extend that and be more open to the community going forward, but it's a matter of just trying to get to a point where we can get the basic functionality, what we think is required generally out there. In the medium term, the plan is that the serials functionality will be covered by the acquisition SIG. At least that's the current plan, but there is obviously overlap with the metadata management SIG as well. And we have had a couple of conversations with the metadata management SIG about some aspects, and I think there are more of those to come in the future at some point. When we looked at initially, when I tried to map out like what was there and what was missing in terms of what we might broadly say was serials functionality, and this was the diagram I came up with. There are aspects here that are to do with predictable resources. There's unpredictable resources which standing orders might fall into. You know, we don't know what's coming next, or we don't know when it's going to come, or not at least for any kind of predictable schedule. We might be told, oh, there'll be a publication next year, but you might not have anything more. We obviously have stuff in place already for orders and invoices, although there are some probably gaps there that relate to serials in how they relate to a serials or subscription record. We have a way of receiving pieces at the moment, but we don't have claiming. And oh, somebody's drawing on the screen. That's not me. And we have we obviously have a load of inventory information, but we don't have at the moment aspects like scheduling of binding or scheduling of other stock management stuff like disposal or movement to store or movement between sites. And so like everything in white here is kind of missing right now, I would say. This is very high level, but it's what I'd say is broadly we found was missing. What we are focusing on right now is a very small corner of that, which is around the idea of a serial having some manifestation in Folio that links to an order, that has a prediction pattern that can automate the creation of pieces that you will then receive. So that is essentially where we are working in this space right now. And these slides should already be up on the Sched if you want to download them, by the way. So the high level view of the current work is that we'll have a new serial record, and that will hold information about the serial and be sufficient for the users to find and manage the relevant records when they're doing work in serials. The serials record will hold publication pattern information enough to generate a list of expected issues for a year. And I'm trying to establish some terminology around here, but I'm currently calling those scheduled pieces. So this is not the same as a receiving piece. If those of you who've worked with receiving, that has the concept of a receiving piece. A scheduled piece is a notional idea that you will get this issue, not a concrete kind of it will be in this location or it will be it has been received or whatever. The scheduled pieces will then be used to generate receiving pieces. And that means that we can generate one set of scheduled pieces. And if you get multiple copies of the same journal or copies in different locations, we can create a receiving piece for each of those. So that's like one of the reasons that differentiation is there. And then receiving will be done using the existing receiving app. I see there's something in chat, Martina. Is that? Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just talk about the current the work we have already done. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of some of that. And then I'll talk about the work that is still to be done. We've established a new serials management module that's up on Folio Snapshot. If you want to go and look at it, it is minimal. You'll see what it looks like this morning, but it is there if you want to have a play around. And all the functionality I'll show you this morning is on Folio Snapshot, and you can play around with it as far as you're able to. The serial record currently is like we've done a really basic implementation. It holds you're able to edit and create and edit serial records that has a status, a linked order line, a description, and a publication pattern. And that's it at the moment. I think I'll talk later about some need to extend that, but that's where we are right now. And we have really basic search functionality in there. The main kind of method of search at the moment is actually you search for the POL, and then you find the serials that are attached to that POL. So if there were all of the search you'd expect for the POL is part of that. So you can search for the POL by title, by ISSN, by all the things that you could search for in orders. And then when you locate that purchase order line, we'll show the serials that are related to it. I think, again, that's an area where I'll talk a little bit about more work needed, but it gets you to the point where you can essentially navigate through your serials records. In terms of the publication pattern, we've established just the basic concept of the publication pattern, and that has three parts. I've put these in the wrong order, really, but Let's start. Recurrence information is the first thing. So this is essentially how often does this thing come? And then we have omission and combination information. So that allows you to say, okay, so this comes monthly, but the July and August issues are combined, or this comes daily, but not on the 25th of December. So that latter one is an omission and the previous one is a combination. As a result of that, you then can end up with a list of expected pieces with a publication date and with any combined issues or omitted issues represented. And that is my cue to do a demonstration. Oh, stupid. Right. Okay, try again. Button. Not a good start, is it? Oh, well, that's not good. Well, that's a shame because I had set up some accounts there we could use. Let me let me just see if I can quickly do something here. Yeah. If there's anybody who can sort that out or inquire on Slack, that would be brilliant. Right. Hopefully it doesn't really matter if, yeah, okay. So switch to my demonstration script. Really basically, if I create a new serial record and select a PO line, here we have a journal order and that links in the POL. I'll just make that a little bit bigger. So that's linking in the purchase order line to the serial. At the moment, there's a description field as well. I'm just going to repeat the title in there because we don't have a title display right now, so it's just easier to see what we're working with. Let's try that this way. So you can see if I do the order line search, I can search by all of the things you'd expect to be able to search the order line by, whether that's title or fund code or location or whatever. And then once you've found it, then you can bring up the serials related to that. So generally, we'd expect an order line to have one, generally we'd expect an order line to have one serial record for the majority of cases, but because order lines can have packages associated with them, they can have multiple titles in the same order line. So it would be, in those cases, you would have two serials records, one for each title. The selection of the title from the order line isn't part of what we've done yet, but is part of what we need to do. So if I look at some examples, that's interesting. Okay. Well, That is obviously not working as I'd expect. Or I haven't loaded that one. Well, let me do a new one. So if we take the Journal of Belgian History, then if I want to add a publication for this, then you add that from here. And essentially, the publication pattern also has a status. We'd expect there to be one active publication pattern for a serial at a time. So essentially, the publication patterns are either deprecated, those are ones that are no longer active. So if a journal changes publication pattern, you'd have a new one, the existing one would become deprecated, and the new one would become active. And we also have draft. That means, obviously, if you're told in advance, hopefully, that the publication pattern is changing, you can set up that as soon as you know the issue, keep your active publication pattern for as long as you need. And then at the point where that switches over, you can swap the draft to the active one to deprecated and the draft one to active. So you can kind of move forward. So you can have many deprecated. Generally, you'd expect really to want to have hopefully one active, but you can have one active and then potentially one or more deprecated and one or more draft. But I mean, typically one draft, one active and many deprecated would be like your maximum, I think. You wouldn't expect to have lots of different drafts because like the whole point would be that they were only when you were going to change.
In chat, do you want to hear that now or later?
How long have we got? How long?
You have 15 minutes spent now, so
okay. Let's take it at the end.
Yep.
So I go that for everyone. So if you've got questions, make a note, and we'll do them at the end of my session. So here we say how often the publication comes. So this is a daily publication. So we pick a time unit, which is day, the number of days in a cycle, so that's 1. And the number of issues per cycle, that's 1. So this is 1 issue per day. And if that's it, then what we do is we can now preview what that looks like. And so if I say we start on first, let's say 2023, if I were to generate the scheduled issues for that, then we get a list of all the 365 issues, and each one of those would then create a receiving piece. Obviously, at the moment, we don't have any labeling on that. That is, again, work that we're yet to do, but that's the basic idea. If we have a pattern which is 1 issue per month, then it's similar. We pick month, 1 issue per 1 cycle. But here we have to specify something else, which is which day of the month it comes on. And we can do that either by picking a day, or we can pick a week day. So which week of the month it comes in and which day of that week it comes in. So if I say this comes on the 1st, which might be typical, published on the, sorry, I say comes, actually this is meant to represent the publication date, not the date it's expected to arrive in the library. The date it's expected to arrive in the library, we would calculate and insert into the expected receipt date in the receiving piece. So you generate that only when you're creating the receiving piece. What we're dealing here is with the notional, at least, publication date, although obviously I realize that those may be notional not necessarily reflected by reality always. So again, similar thing. And now if we generate that preview, if I generate from the 1st of August this time, so it's not starting on the 1st of January, then we get a count August through July, and those publication dates there. I'll just do one more. So I'll just do one more. If we were to say, that we had an issue that was once every 3 years. So in this case, the cycle length is longer, it's 3 years. It's one issue per 3 years. And here we get a prompt for a date format, and then we have to say when. So this is coming on the 1st of January of year, and that means which year in the cycle. So do we expect it in the first year of the cycle, the second year of the cycle, or the third year of the cycle? And obviously, if you had one, you're probably thinking like it would come on in the first year of the cycle, kind of that's how you think about it. But if it was several, if there were 2 over 3 years, you might have one in the first year, one in the third year, or something like that, or 2. Yeah, I mean, so, and again, everything else works as you'd expect. So here, if we say we start on January the 1st, then you get like it comes on January the 1st. But if I were to say it's year 2 of the cycle, then we start again on 2023. Then it's expected on the 1st of 2024 because that's the second year of the cycle. So I hope that you can get from that. There's a huge amount of flexibility in a relatively simple set of parameters. The exact options you have depend on, you know, how many you're getting per cycle and what level you're defining that at. Because if you're defining like 1 a week, you don't have to say a day of the month, you have to say a day of the week. And so all of that kind of stuff is built in so you don't get prompted for that. And I'm aware that I probably need to not spend too much longer on this, but I just want to show an omission, I think. So if we have, I mean, a typical one might be, we have 1 per month. Let's say that comes on the 1st. And then if we have a combination rule, then we can combine issues. So we can say, we're going to combine issue 7, and we're going to combine 2 issues. So here we're saying, which issue do we start from the combination, and how many then subsequent issues are combined into 1? And so this will, if I've got everything right, oh, that's gone to -1. If I've got everything right, then if I do a pattern for this, then I should find that we get a combined piece here. So July and August combined, and then the next one is September. Okay, there are omissions as well. They kind of work as you'd expect. If you say that a certain day is omitted, like a daily publication not published on Christmas Day, then it will skip that one. What it will do is actually generate it and mark it as omitted. So you can see that would have been there, but it's omitted because of the rules that you've set. So we're trying to be really transparent about how that is all put together. Right. I will quickly go through what's left. So obviously you will notice there's no labeling on that, no enumeration and chronology. We've started that work, but it's not exposed in the UI yet. And it's the next big piece of work we need to do is rules that say, okay, given 12 issues with 1 combined in July, what are they actually called? So, and how do the volume and issue numbering work, or how many layers of numbering you have that we need to deal with. Once you saw me do the preview of schedule pieces, once we're generating those schedule pieces, not just for a preview, but you'll be able to interact with them. And then you'll be able to edit them. If you get something wrong or you have to tweak it manually, you can tweak that on the schedule pieces. And generally, we're doing everything we can to prompt you to do all of that work up front, so that when you come to generate the receiving pieces, everything is already as right as it possibly can be. Again, you can't get it perfect. The thing that lands on your desk, you can't stop it being wrong. You can't. But the more we can do up front to prompt you to get everything right in terms of your best knowledge of the prediction, then you won't have to then fiddle with the receiving pieces very often. And also, because you could be generating multiple receiving pieces for one scheduled piece, you don't want to, like, if you've got 3 copies, you don't want to have to do that correction 3 times when you can do it once. And yeah, we haven't done the generation of receiving pieces from scheduled pieces. That's not been started yet. That red arrow means it's not started. I mentioned we need to expand the serials record. It's very basic at the moment. There's some stuff to do around title and display. There's kind of I think there's a how long is a piece of string type question there, because there's loads of data we could store on the serial record, and I don't think we'll probably keep it relatively minimal for the first iteration, but enough for the app to be usable and you'd be able to see this is the journal that I want to work with, that kind of thing. There's a load of UX enhancements. Again, how long is a piece of string? Some of it is probably essential. We need to make it work better so it works for you. Some of it we can probably come back to after release. And finally, reports on overdue issues. We aren't planning to do claiming right now, but we do want to be able to see, here is a list of receiving issues that have passed their expected receipt date by a margin. Our first idea is that might be done as a dashboard widget. If that doesn't mean anything to you, I'm doing a session on dashboards later today. Come along to that and you'll find out. And Martina is doing one on Thursday, 3:30. So come along to that one as well. But it could be some other kind of report. We might do that in a different way, but that's our first thought. No work started on that. And really, as you can tell, we haven't defined that work. We're leaving that until we've got everything else working. So medium-term goals, refinement and extension of functionality done in the first release. So the first release, I'm hoping for Quesnalia, that's our target, and looks realistic. Refinement of extension of functionality. I'm sure there will be things that we miss that we decide deliberately to miss. There'll be things that we miss and then people start to tell us, hey, just a minute, it doesn't do this thing that's really essential. We'll have to go back. So I expect there to be some rework. The medium-term goals for overall for serials, and this isn't necessarily in the serials module that we've just built. It's like across Folio. Claim intervals, manual claims, automated claims, and then in long term, support for non-predictable publications such as standing orders, support for fuller serials lifecycle, including bindery, stock movement and disposal, and linking invoicing and subscription periods. All of that work, except the first one in my medium-term goals, is something that we expect to work with the acquisitions team on. So we had a very long meeting with Dennis and Joe yesterday. Joe's going to talk, I think, a bit about maybe bindery this morning, and I think looking for input, but I'll leave him to say what he wants from you. But this isn't something we're doing like separate to anything that's going on in the main Folio development. We absolutely expect to be working, if it makes sense for claims to live in receiving or in orders, that's where it will live. There's no sense in which we're doing something different and new here. The serials module itself, we thought long and hard about whether it needed to be its own module, but decided because of the complexity of the predicament patterns and some questions about how you split up the functionality in Folio, it was a good idea to do it as a separate module. It also probably allowed us to make more rapid progress with it. But we definitely think that in the long term, the other functionality will live where it's most sensible to live, given the new picture we have of serials, orders, and receipt. And that I will stop. I've got a very short amount of time for questions.
We have some questions in chat, but maybe we can answer those in the course of this session. Are there any questions here in the room? I can see Julie.
If you want to ask, I could repeat the question.
Yeah,
oh, thank you, Martina. Martina wants to get her steps in today.
Hi, I actually have a couple of questions. The first question is, you were describing that there is only one active publication pattern per serial record. Well, it is the case that it is not uncommon for there to be multiple active publication patterns.
For things like supplements and indexes, are you thinking?
Yes, specifically supplements, but yes, indexes as well. And I was wondering, how will that be handled? Will there be two serial records associated with the same holdings, or?
At the moment, you could definitely do it like that. Mm-hmm. We did talk about this, and our primary first release has been driven very much by the funders' requirements, and that's been Duke and GBV. And we talked about supplements and indexes And they said, for now, we're okay if we have to create those issues manually, because it's such a small amount in the big picture. It could definitely be done already by just doing 2 serials records and calling one supplement and one the other. It might be that we change our definition of one active to one active per something. I think we'd have to be careful to think about, is that it, because at the moment, if there were two, like if that was done as a package order, then you could do it as 2 serial records as it stands. And if it was done as 2 individual orders, then it would definitely be 2 serials records.
Right. Well, I'm thinking of the situation where it's one order and it includes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's going to be very common for law libraries.
Yeah. So I think that option, I think there are 2 things we can say. One is that you could do it now by just duplicating the serials record and having 2. That would work exactly the same in all other ways. It might be a little bit clunky from your point of view because you've got 2 places to look, but if you search by order number, you'd get both of them. We could definitely look at it at relaxing that rule on one active in the longer term.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, a serial record is going to be reliant on a purchase order being present.
At the moment, we don't require a purchase order to be present.
Okay.
The question that then arises is that how is that linked to anything at that point? And at the moment, we only link to the purchase order line. We have discussed whether we also need to link to the inventory item or whether we optionally, it's either one or the other or neither. If you wanted to use the serials module just to generate your scheduled issues, and then you're going to push that out via an API to some other system that you did checking in, that also model would work because we don't require anything except, I mean, at the moment, a description, but it will be, I think, a title eventually to be the serial record. As long as you can name it, you'd be able to do that. So we kind of design it in a way that it can work in isolation, but that's not our expectation of most Folio users. It would work with orders. I think inventory, we need to decide whether we also do a separate link to inventory. And I think that would not be in the first release, but it could be. There's nothing in the structures that we're building that would mean that was not possible. And we've even already discussed designs for, like, how would you update a record, a serials record, if it was linked to both an inventory record and an order record, and what would that look like for the user? Which title would you use, and what information would you use, and how would you make that clear? And is that a good idea in the first place? So we're definitely aware of that as a possible requirement, but we haven't done any work on it beyond designs.
Thank you.
Okay, there is one more question that we have time for. Don't know, Joe, do you already want to set yourself up, and then Dennis can ask his question at that time?
And I'll pop into the chat once we've finished and answer any chat questions there. I think, Dennis, there is another question here. Would you be, just because we talked a long time and we can talk again later, I know we'll talk, so
I would, in previous systems expected this serials information to be in Mark Holdings records. But you're saying these are not connected, these are only connected to purchase order lines. They're not connected to Mark in any way, it sounds like.
So they're not currently connected to Mark in any way. If there was a connection to a Mark record, just as the answer to the last question, that would be via inventory. Not directly to the Mark record. So it would be to the inventory instance, and the inventory instance may or may not have a Mark record attached.
So how are you anticipating people migrate serials information in, which would be in Mark format, probably?
So we, when we started work on this, one of Duke's requirements is that we're able to migrate stuff from their Aleph 853 record, which is doesn't fully implement the Mark standard, but doesn't implement anything other than the Mark standard, if you see what I mean. So they don't support absolutely every aspect of the Mark standard there. And so we are confident that that is, that you can migrate from an 853 pattern to our patterns. We haven't built tools to do that yet, but we have had that in mind. And much of what we've done has been informed by analysis of the 6,000 serials records that Duke have patterns for, to make sure that we can cover all of those different patterns. There are some limitations right now. I didn't go into them, but there are some places where we fall short of absolutely everything, which we were discussing with the funders, and they said that's fine. We out of 6,000 records, only 22 had combinations, and only 2 had combinations and omissions together. So there are areas like that where we've decided there are certain things we don't support right now, but which I think we might find we would find as we worked with more sites. But generally, I would say we're confident that you could migrate from 853 pattern to this.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
The vast Thanks, Anne-Marie. And the questions in chat, Owen will answer in the course of this session, or we will send around the answers afterwards in the acquisition Slack channel. So if you are set up, Joe, it's your stage.
All right, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Okay, so welcome to the second half of this presentation, where we're going to talk about new development in the receiving app with a particular emphasis on serials, but some of what I'm going to talk about will also apply to monographs. And this is also the audience participation part. Yay. So first things first, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we are now focusing our attention on some of the additional features in the receiving app. And we're starting with the trifecta of claiming, routing, and bindery. We've had some good conversations with Owen and Knowledge Integration about how some of this is going to work and where things are going to reside. But we're putting claiming, routing, and bindery, at least initially, in association with receiving, just because there are monographic components to them as well as serial components. So the audience participation part is, we want to hear from you what your expectations are, what your needs are. We're not doing this completely pie in the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and show what I'm working on. And I'm going to begin with what I'm doing with regard to routing. This is fairly new, as in I'm the only person who has seen this as of yet. So I haven't even discussed this with Dennis. But this is basically beginning with routing. Please, if you feel I'm on the wrong approach or if things need to be fine-tuned, that's a big reason of why I'm here. But the idea is that when a piece comes in, whether it's a serial or a monograph that needs to go somewhere outside the normal circulation system or otherwise get sent somewhere at the point of receipt, there's a way you can track it that's a little bit more robust than simply using a note on the PO line. The reason that we're still going to associate, or I shouldn't say we're going to, right now my thinking is we're going to associate the routing with the PO line, because the person placing the order and creating the PO line is probably the person most likely to understand where it's going to need to go when it gets here. The other person who might need to know would be the person receiving, but I'm thinking the person at the point of order creating the PO line is going to know that. So person creates the PO and PO line and will designate the PO line as routed via some means. In my mind's eye, this is purely conceptual. I'm thinking we're just going to add a routing accordion to the POL, and you just expand that accordion and add routing. So you create a routing list, and then to that routing list, the routing list is going to be associated with users. and you can add users from the user lookup to that routing list. One idea we're also toying with is the possibility of adding location lookup. But I have to think that through, because at the end of the day, we also need to be able to print this list. And I just have to work through how that's going to work with being able to deliver a nice looking routing list that contains the disparate fields from the user and location records. But it's something we're exploring. So then we add users via that routing list, via user lookup. And what I'm really thinking is that you could have as many separate routing lists as you have physical pieces associated with that given POL. So if you've got 3 pieces coming in on that PO line, you can have 3 separate routing lists because you really want to associate one list per physical piece. Is that more or less accurate? Okay. And then, so I've got a little bit of logic, and then when that's done, you just save it and you've got the routing list associated. Then when the piece comes in, person opens the receiving app and gets that piece that's associated with the POL. If there's routing attached, I'm envisioning that the routing accordion is going to be near the top where it can be seen on the screen, and it will be open, and possibly some other visual alert that, hey, there's routing associated with this, so that it's very clear to the person doing the receiving that routing is attached. And then that associated staff member will be able to take appropriate action that would be associated with the routing list, such as editing it, printing it, et cetera, et cetera. That's basically where I'm at right now with this, but I'm hoping to get a little bit of feedback to see, is that generally in line with what people expect here? Okay.
There is a question in chat. Do you want to answer that now? What about the case that copies of a publication need to be routed to different recipients?
So we can have multiple recipients that go in order, or if there are multiple copies that go to multiple different recipients, there are multiple routing lists. So you can have a separate routing list for each physical piece associated with that. So like if you get 3 pieces in, you can have 3 separate routing lists. I have to figure out how easy it will be to have logic on the Folio side that will prevent adding more routing lists than there are pieces associated with the PO line. But the general idea is that you can have multiple routing lists associated with a given PO line as long as there are multiple pieces available to route. Are there any other questions or comments associated with this at all?
I'm not an acquisitions person, so people can tell me I'm wrong, but I imagine that we actually get a lot of materials that we might want to route that we don't have a purchase order or purchase order line for, something that might come as part of a membership or that we always get donated. So I'm wondering if that has been thought about.
So at the question, oh, well, the question was, got caught in Zoom. So I think right now, I believe the receiving app requires the existence of a PO line in order for receiving to work. And so at this time, because it's part of receiving, I'm not sure how that would work. I would think the workaround would be to have a $0 PO associated with it.
We do have a feature written for receiving without a purchase order line. And I think some of the things that Owen was talking about just now, about serials, check-in records that may not link to a POL, if you were expecting them to create pieces at the moment, that's not possible. So it might be something we need to address for a couple of reasons. So it's on the radar, I think I would say, but yeah, be more a question of whether we require the POL for the receiving records or not. If we're attaching routing lists to the receiving records. So it would be possible to not have a POL if we implement that feature.
All right. Any other feedback on routing? Questions about routing? Good times. Okay. The next piece of functionality that we are going to be addressing is bindery. And do I have a bindery screen up? I don't think I have my bindery screen up. Let me pull up my bindery screen. No, go. Sending serials. There we go. All right, so this says sending serials to be bound, but the intent is actually all sorts of binding. This is, I need to clean this up. It's fairly ugly. It's been a few days since I've looked at it, but the general idea, again, is that pieces come in, and let me expand this a little bit. So pieces designated for the bindery. With regard to serials, we're going to need to know what constitutes pieces that get bound together. So a monograph that's in flimsy paperback that you want to get bound, that's fairly straightforward. You just say, send this to the bindery. If you've got a serial or you're binding multiple pieces together, then there needs to be a way of designating, okay, what are the things that need to get bound together? Some libraries, particularly when dealing with serials, like to wait for a couple of extra issues to come in before they get sent out. That's what I'm calling the bindery offset. And then we've got the business logic of the pieces come in as you gather what is to be bound. Do you have a full bindery unit ready to go? And have you met the offset? And once that occurs, then we need the logic where it's, okay, this needs to go to the bindery. Let's gather the stuff. And then we have to do all of the other logic. And this is where I'm really having to think through how this is going to work and the order in which things happen, because particularly when dealing with serials, once you've gathered those pieces, you have to figure out, are there item records or not? Are they barcoded or not? You have to get them together. You have to get them into an unavailable status so that they can no longer be made available for circulation or other purposes. And then there has to be, basically, they need to get merged down into one. They need to get sent to the bindery, and there needs to be processing so that your 5 pieces then become one piece, and your holdings reflect that rather than having 5 individual pieces, you now have one bound volume. So that is the very broad strokes as to how that works and the timing of when things happen and how those things happen. It's still kind of fuzzy in my mind exactly how that's going to work. I shouldn't say fuzzy. That's not exactly right. My pie in the sky ideal is that we'll also have some capabilities available for generating necessary output reports that need to go to the external bindery. That's a little bit further out, but that is also very much on our radar. So if you can kind of read my spaghetti chart, I am not the prettiest designer of flowcharts, but that's basically where we're at. So are there any questions or feedback on the bindery or additional clarification that I can give on this right now?
I just wanted to make sure that you're talking to the people who are working on workflows and or to do, because it seems like there might be a lot of overlap here and possible for potential for collaboration.
We are starting to have those conversations. This stuff is all very, very, very new. And I just did the first major round of requirements gathering. And now this is part of the reason that I'm here is I'm coming to you so that I can get additional feedback and make sure I'm thinking about, and do you account for, and those types of things.
One of the reasons I was thinking about that is one of the things that might happen along the way is someone has to make a decision about whether you bind short or not. This comes back to the receiving, like, okay, we got issues 1, 2, and 4. We're missing 3. At some point, someone has to make a decision. Do we hold off? Do we bind short? And
that is a consideration. Short binding is a consideration. The ability to override. One of the things that I'm going to have to deal with, and I'm saving that for tomorrow, Joe, rather than today, Joe, is what do we do in the event of a midstream title change? What do we... Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so, and that's the other thing we need to, and actually I would really appreciate feedback on this, is the question of a bound width. So what happens, how do people want that to behave when there's a title change? How do people want the system to behave when you've got a true bound width, when you've got a pamphlet on chemistry and a pamphlet on like music history in one bound width that somebody years ago did? What is the public experience expected to be? What is the staff search experience expected to be? Should there be 1 barcode or 2? Do we have multiple instances linked to a single item?
We have a single item linked to multiple holdings for that.
Okay, and does that work well? It's
not fully implemented, and my library is doing it slightly differently, but there's been a lot of work done on it, and I think the solution is as good as it could ever be, and I have a lot of opinions, so I think we did an amazing job. Felix Hem did a lot of work on it.
Okay, I will probably be in touch, because that is one of the things we're thinking about is there's a part of me that says with bound widths, especially when they're unrelated pieces, what were you thinking? But at the same time, what is the optimal outcome? What is the optimal use case? And we obviously want to give flexibility, but I do think allowing a single item to be associated with multiple instances might be the best possible outcome. But we're also going to want to have conversations about how is that going to appear in the public display. And we do. Oh, okay. So Anne Marie says we already have that with where you can have an item with multiple instances, and we've already resolved how that's going to work with a bound width. Okay, great. Okay, so that was Anne Marie's problem and not my problem, and I'm ever so grateful for that. It was Charlotte's problem. Okay, so well, that's one less thing I'm going to have to worry about. Thank you.
They're going to change the title.
Okay, are there any other questions, any other feedback on the bindery process? We have 5 minutes left. Okay, no further questions on bindery. I'm not yet in a position where I can talk about claiming beyond saying that we are working on claiming right now. The serial specific claiming that Owen mentioned, we're having conversations about that, but Dennis has actually done a lot of work already into getting at least a basic claiming framework together. And we expect that there will be something by Quiznalia. Is that right, Dennis?
Yeah, I think there are a handful of features that you can follow in Jira. I don't have the numbers on me, but there will be some basic claiming functionality introduced with the Kuzneli release.
So we do have that to look forward to, and I don't think I have those up, but we are working on claiming as well, and it is associated with the receiving app. So that's basically all I had. And at this point, if you have any additional questions on receiving app or additional things you'd like to see in receiving, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can also reach out to us in Slack. Acquisition SIG is the controlling group that's doing that, so we can have feedback there if you have additional thoughts. If there are no further questions or comments, then thank you all very much.